Well, people say there's more parity in the NHL than ever before. So why is it so hard for mushy middle teams to get great? And dear God, is it time to change the playoff format in the NHL? Debate on today's Locked On Lightning.
You're Locked On Lightning, your daily podcast on the Tampa Bay Lightning, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Thank you for making Locked On Lightning your first listen of the day. Every single day, we are your free daily Tampa Bay Lightning podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, we want to begin by shouting out our everydayers, those of you who tune into every single show, every single day. We love you guys. We appreciate the support you give us week in and week out. I'm Nick Morgan, and I am joined by the Outback Bowl to my Beef O'Brady's Bowl, Greg Steven. And Greg, I have a question for you right off the bat.
Okay.
If your employer offered you $16 million a year to work there, making you the highest paid player, not just at your workplace, but in the history of your industry, how much would you have to hate your employer to say, no, thanks, I'm good?
I want to say a lot, or you have to think really highly of yourself, like irrationally highly, right? Like,
yeah. Like I don't know. I'm better than if there was a Connor McDavid of my industry. I don't know, $2 million a year better than him.
If someone offered me a job that would last the rest of my life and I got total 16 million, I'd take it. So
yeah. Maybe Karl Kaprizov's just living in a different world than we are. That whole story is insane, though.
It is. I'm curious to see if it's that he actually wants to move like somewhere else, but we'll see.
Yeah. Bill Guerin had a podcast last night where he's like, don't worry about it. If I'm a Minnesota Wild fan, I am worried about it. 100%. Hey, before we get too deep into the woods here, I want to mention today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com and win $300 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Greg, interesting discussion on today's show because you and I are putting together some season previews of teams. We got Atlantic Division previews coming up here in a little bit. We're also getting ready to make our NHL picks. And the more we're researching, the more you kind of came up with an interesting point about parity in the NHL maybe being a bit dead compared to what people say it is.
Yeah, and I can see it to some extent, right? Like, I think most teams have at least one guy that is the guy, right? And I think that's great. Do I think that there's true parity? It's hard for me to be convinced of that because look, I believe in any circumstance, any team can win any game in any sport, right? Because that's just how sports work. Could a really weak team actually take down one of, we'll call them a juggernaut teams in the playoffs? I don't think so. And the last big example I can think of a team making a run that was pretty unexpected in my eyes was like the Blues, right? That was, oh God. My years are poor, but I want to say like mid 2010s, right? Somewhere in there.
It was 2019.
Oh, it was? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Wow. So right before the Lightning.
Well, that depends. Would you consider Florida against Vegas? Would you consider Florida as the 8th seed a unexpected out of nowhere cup run?
Not really.
Well, at the time, not with the context of what we know now about the Florida Panthers. Because I would say
that was the Tkachuk era, right? The beginning of it.
Do what?
That was the beginning of Tkachuk's time there, right?
That was his first season, yeah.
Right. So that's why, to me, no, because when that kind of guy moves there, to me, it's like, yeah, this guy's insane. He's going to make this team much better. I think they have a much better chance.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, and I do agree with an extent. It seems like the last couple of years, I would say even dating back to the lockout where we won the back-to-back cups, it kind of seems like the obvious pick to win the Stanley Cup has won the Stanley Cup. And I don't want to say parity is dead Because I think if you look across the league, there's a lot of teams with really, really good players. I think there's more great players than ever before. I think where I have the issue is we talk about the mushy middle. And there's a lot of hockey players that have, or hockey writers who have used that term before. And it's sort of you're not good enough to be like a true cup contender, but you're also not bad enough to be like tanking and get like a first round pick. So you're either sort of one of the first 4 or 5 teams that miss the playoffs, or you're a 7 seed or like the 3rd divisional seed and you get stomped in the first round or second round and it doesn't look close.
Yeah. To me, that's the Calgary Flames.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Shout out the Flames. We promise we're not picking on the Flames on this show. They're just
a good example, truly.
Everything. Yeah. I think it's harder now to escape the mushy middle than it has been ever before. And I think it's probably a microcosm of a couple things. I think there's been a couple of flat, like just the flat cap over the past couple of years, I think has made it a little bit harder for teams to have that chance to grow. I think the whole concept of free agency has changed. I mean, you'd think back, 20 years, a team can absolutely go out and get a all-star first liner in free agency each and every year. You think back probably the last 5 years, the only true, like in their prime first bona fide stars that hit the free agent market were Jake Gensel and Mitch Marner. And they didn't hit the market. Gensel came here, his rights via trade. Mitch Marner negotiated a sign and trade. So that's sort of one of those, they didn't hit the open market. And I think you're seeing that players are kind of having more streamlined, ideas of where they want to go and play. Really the only way to sort of build yourself into the potential of a Florida Panther or a Tampa Bay Lightning or a Vegas Golden Knight is the route that a lot of teams are taking. And that's, trade everybody and hope that you rack up a couple of number 1 picks or number 2 picks or whatever it is. And it's teams have success doing that. I mean, every cup winner, I would say, with the exception of what you brought up, the St. Louis Blues from a few years ago, every cup winner has had like a top 3 pick as one of the centerpieces of their team. And I think it's getting really, really harder to build a legitimate contender unless you kind of go that tank route, and there's teams that are doing it without it that are getting there and are building some good teams. And so I'm not trying to paint with a broad brush here, but I think the trend is it's either go the route of suck for 5 years, rack up some all-star players, then be a juggernaut in another 3 or 4 years, or it's, you're kind of clinging on into that playoff fringe area and hoping that maybe something falls your way, like a Matthew Tkachuk trade.
Yeah. But look, to me, there's one issue with what's going on in the NHL, and I love that the NHL is growing. But to me, that adding all these expansion teams makes it harder for parity to exist, in my opinion. Because I think there are only so many superstars, right? And yes, adding one team isn't going to change that. But look, we've added how many teams in the last decade?
2.
Right? Exactly, but it's about to be 3, right? Because they're going to do Atlanta.
Oh, I don't know if that's a done deal, but I agree with you. I do think that there's going to be more expansion over the next 10 years.
Yeah. To me, it's just like, if we keep expanding, maybe people would argue it actually evens the parity even more, but I don't know. To me, it's just you're adding another team that is going to handpick, if they do the similar format where they each take a team's player, going to get a bunch of mid guys and then, I don't know, you weaken the depth of everyone else's roster, and then create a very average squad, generally speaking.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, it just doesn't. I feel like at a certain point, there's too many teams,
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I can see the argument going both ways. I can see people saying that expansion is going to cause the gap to go even further.
Yeah.
Because it is going to take some good players out of those middle of the pack teams. And I can also see the fact that teams are now being a little bit more stretched. Like the player pool is going to be a little bit more stretched. That maybe that does open some things out. There's not one answer to why this is happening, but I think that I do think that it is a good amount of parity in the NHL. I do think it's possible, and we see it happen a lot over history. I think it's possible for a team to kind of slip up there and make a big run. I just think of the trend of last year is everything like that is getting harder. Like it's getting harder for upsets to happen. It's getting harder for, the underdog teams to win a 7-game series. And it's getting harder to transform your team from that middle of the pack okay team into a juggernaut without help.
Definitely. Yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah. So that kind of transitions us to what we wanted to talk today. Of the teams in the NHL that you would maybe consider not a cup favorite, maybe one of those mushy middle teams, or just a team that's been in the bottom of the pack the past couple of years, who has the best shot to win a Stanley Cup this year? We're going to be talking about that on today's Locked on Lightning when we come back. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season, oh my God, it's back, and we are thrilled. Football is back on our TVs. Hey, FanDuel wants to make sure you're ready for game days this season with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love using FanDuel because it always fits exactly how I want to bet at any given moment. I can build player props. I can build a same-game parlay. And my favorite thing to do is jump into the action live as it unfolds with in-game bets. I love just taking a big swing on teams when they're down in the third quarter. JJ McCarthy, thank you for your service, sir. FanDuel makes every game more exciting, whether you're watching your team or just keeping an eye on your fantasy lineup. Whatever you're doing, it's a quick, easy way to add a little bit more zest to your football watching experience. So if you're ready to play, download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. Again, FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. Welcome back to Locked on Lightning. Nick Morgan alongside Greg Stephen with you. And Greg, main topic today, we are talking about teams under the radar that we think maybe has a best shot of winning the Stanley Cup this year. I'm talking about teams that are not the obvious favorites, teams that have maybe been treading water the past couple of years in that middle ground, or teams that, quite frankly, have sucked for the past few years that maybe are ready to finally take that big next step, maybe become a contender a little bit out of nowhere. Greg, is there a specific team you have in mind that maybe is your under the radar cup pick this year?
I think for me, it's the Senators. I think the Senators have the capability to win a Stanley Cup with maybe just a couple tweaks or additions. I think they're really close. And I think they have a really nice, young, developed roster at this point that is going to look pretty good for the next 5 years, at least.
They're a team flying under the radar in a lot of aspects. Not only because I think that just the style that they play, but I also think everybody right now is talking about, Montreal kind of being the hot team.
Mm-hmm.
People are, Florida Panthers are in that division. Tampa Bay's in that division. Toronto's always going to dominate the headlines. I don't think people are looking at Ottawa and being like, this is a team that's going to take a big step forward. But I'm with you, Greg. I mean, I don't see a reason why they can't. They're a young team with, I think, a couple of people all across the board that you would consider people that can develop into legitimate NHL stars. Brady Tkachuk, Tim Stützle, Jake Sanderson are some of the people that I had in mind that I could see being legitimate top 25 NHL players. And they're only getting better.
Yeah. Look, Sanderson looked insane this past season too. He looked fantastic. So if he keeps, trending upward, wow.
That's a legitimate game-changing defenseman. Developing the way he is. And I will say they individually, like they got to the playoffs for the first time in a while, but you look at the stats and there's a lot of players that maybe underwhelmed a little bit compared to their, I guess, like recent scoring averages. So there's
that like Drake Batherson.
Yeah. Well, and Brady Tkachuk was injured a lot, didn't have the best year scoring wise.
Mm-hmm.
There's potential for. I'm with you. I'm on the Senators bandwagon there.
Who are you going to say?
I was also going to say the Ottawa Senators, but
really? Okay.
I'm going to throw another one at you, and
I got another one too after yours.
Oh, you got another one? Okay.
No, let's hear yours first. Go ahead.
Okay. The one I'm thinking of is I am going to go the New Jersey Devils.
Okay.
And then maybe this is cheating a little bit because they had that really, really good season a couple of years ago. I think what you saw last year was maybe the I guess not the curse, but just sort of the territory of being a young up and coming team is there was a lot of good and there's a lot of bad. And, they took that big step forward a couple of years ago. We're one of the best teams in the NHL. Were terrible the year prior, and then last year got back into the playoffs. They have a lot of really good pieces there and a lot of really good young pieces. Jack Hughes is a superstar. I think he's firmly in that territory where he's going to be one of the best players in the entire NHL within the next couple of years. They have a really good collection of, I think, up and coming defenders. Luke Hughes is firmly took a big step forward last year. Simon Nemec is another guy that's, I think, ready to sort of break out this year. Former number 2 overall pick. There's a lot of guys that I think are ready to take that next step. And they have so many good veteran players on that team as well. Everything about the Devils just screams a team that can sort of develop under your eyes, and then finally just some random season like we've seen with some of these teams like Colorado, all of a sudden like a switch flips and they go from surprising young team or team with potential to a legitimate force in the NHL.
I'm going to contest you. I'm going to say they don't have a shot, and here's why. I think they were exposed when Jack Hughes went down this past season. As soon as he went down, there was no hope. And I think that shows that maybe they are close. I don't disagree. I think they are close. I think they have a good roster. They picked up Markstrom. They look a lot better, right? But
yeah,
when your star goes down, if you can't carry the weight at least a little bit, not a good sign. And I think once he went down with a shoulder injury, I think, if I'm not mistaken, and he after that they did not look the same. And like he sure looks still great, and Bratt did too, but that's it. I mean, I don't know. It's tough.
Dougie Hamilton was injured. I would still say
that's the other thing. He's always Jack and Dougie are both injury prone players. Like. To me, it just feels like they're one nasty injury away from just being done, like entirely.
Okay, but if the team stays healthy, that's a team that you can consider a team that takes a big step forward.
No, you're not wrong. I think their health is way more in jeopardy than the others.
Yeah, I don't know. Who's another team that you had in mind?
Yeah, the last one I had was the Mammoth. I think
I'm with you there.
They look so good. Clayton Keller is a boss, and they got Sergachev back there now, and I would consider him a veteran almost at this point. Like he's going to be a teacher for the younger guys. They got Dursey over there. He's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Some of their young guys look good. Like Barrett Hayton, right? He's over there. He looked great this past season. I think Vejmelka also is a good goalie. I know he gets ragged online a lot, but
Yeah.
I think he's actually solid. I think he just needs like the team for him. And I'm hoping that that's the Mammoth, you know?
Yeah. I'm with you on them. I think my only caveat on the Utah Mammoth is dating back to when the Coyotes were a thing. How often were we like, oh, this is the year? Like the Mammoth have a big collection of talent. They're ready to break out. And then it just never happened. They're like,
right. And you know what?
Sabres West, but less of a dumpster fire.
That's what actually stopped me from picking the Sabres in this conversation, because it's like we always say the Sabres might have a shot this time, and then it's just they played well for 12 games, and then all of a sudden they're awful.
Well, also like who on the Buffalo Sabres?
Yeah, I mean at this point, I feel like that's over. But
the one I'm not willing to pick them as like a cup favorite or anything like that, but I would say the one team to maybe watch out for also in this conversation is the Minnesota Wild, just because of how much raw talent they have on that team. Like some of the best collection of young players in the entire NHL. They're probably going to get more out of Jesper Wallstedt this year. Philip Gustafson's a great young goalie. Yeah. And that's not even mentioned, Matt Boldy.
Boldy looks awesome.
Boldy has looked awesome these past couple of years. I think he's firmly took the responsibility of being like a young building block for that team. Karl Kaprizov, if he stays, that's another legitimate. It's crazy how people underrate him is one of the best players in the NHL. And then
agreed. I think he's easily top 5, right? Like
yeah, and then you have players like Marco Rossi who you're looking at and saying like, okay, maybe they take a step forward if they keep him because he's in trade rumors there. But I would say Minnesota's always been a pretty good team. With a couple of young players that you could say, okay, they could develop. They kind of remind me a little bit of like the Dallas Stars. Maybe just like, give it a year and see where they stand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I completely agree. I actually was going to say the Wild as well, but I thought that was maybe not a mid team.
No, I would consider them a mid team. I mean, haven't gotten past the second round in
a
very
long
time. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that counts. All right. So speaking of playoffs, does the playoff format need to change, Greg? I'm warning you. I'm coming in hot on this argument.
I know you are.
Yeah. Let's get to that when we come back on Locked on Lightning. Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Did you know that most people can't name all the financial accounts they own or even what any of them are worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments? When you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why we have Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or on your phone. Monarch is built for people with busy lives. If you put off organizing your finances, Monarch is for you. Monarch does the heavy lifting. You can link all of your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever having to open a spreadsheet. So don't let this financial opportunity slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. Again, that's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONNHL. Welcome back to Locked on Lightning. Nick Morgan alongside Greg Stephen. And Greg, gear up for the debate, my friend. It is time to talk about the current playoff format in the NHL. Does it need to change?
I think so.
Yeah,
I think that I hate it less than a lot of other people, but I do agree that it should change. I don't think that it shouldn't. If it stayed the same this season, am I going to be upset about it? Probably not, but let's hear it. Cause I know like ever since you found out we were going to host this show, you've been thinking about this conversation as a topic.
It's just so boring. The playoffs are so boring. Like when this was first announced, I was like, okay, it's like kind of like a cool bracket style thing.
Yeah.
And as the more it went on, the more I feel like this playoff format has neutered what should be some entertaining playoff performances. We are stuck in this divisional format, and we're getting robbed. I mean, not even just the fact that we've gotten the same matchups like 50 times over the past like 5 years. What, Edmonton and LA have played each other in the first round 4 consecutive seasons. Like, are you telling me there's not a way to freshen that up a little bit? I think what's cool about the playoffs is you get some of those fresh matchups. I think back in the old years, like you think about some of the playoff matchups that Tampa had in some of those early cup runs that came as the result of playing teams that you wouldn't normally consider a rival. Like, how fun were some of those Philly games for a couple of years, after Tampa and Philly met in the Eastern Conference Finals? I think you rob yourself of some really good new matchups. The same for, Tampa in Detroit. Like, that kind of became a little bit of a rivalry after those back-to-back years of playing in the first round. I want to see new matchups. And the other thing about that is I don't want to see the best matchups get stuck in the second round because it's 2 teams who happen to play in the same division. Spread them out. Rank them 1 through 8. And then you will see if the best team, like if there really is parity. Right. Like if the best teams are really from the Central Division. Or if the best teams are really from the Pacific or the Atlantic or whatever it may be. Give me 1 through 8 and just let all hell ring loose. The wild card matchups are the most interesting because those are the only ones where it's like you can maybe see a fresh matchup. Like you saw Vegas and St. Louis last year. Mm-hmm. At least that's intriguing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank God the Senators made it because they played the Leafs in round 1. And I thought that was finally a good change there. But
that was also a division. So
right. Exactly.
It's something new, it's something fresh. But and the other thing, Greg, is I think you sort of rob the ability to move up and down the ladder a little bit more. I can't remember if it was this past year or the year before, but I remember like Tampa and it was 2 years ago because it was the year Tampa and Toronto were locked in, and it was like locked in for a month. And it was like, what's the point of playing the game?
Right.
And you saw like both teams kind of just start to rest people down the stretch because it's like, well, this is our matchup. Like nothing's changing.
Right.
And then
why risk injuries and all that? It's like preseason again.
Both teams kind of wound up falling flat. Mm-hmm. I just think it's time to do something different in the NHL.
I'm 100% with you. And let me add to your point. The bottom half of the Eastern ladder, let's say, last season, none of those teams were going to win the cup. I'm just going to say it outright. None of them were going to win. None of them. I don't think anyone would have picked any of those teams on the bottom. So we have to watch this whole quarter of a bracket just play out for no reason because we know the Leafs, Tampa, or Florida is going to beat them. I just, to me, it's like, I don't even care about this bottom part of the ladder on the East because, like, to me, none of those teams are winning. It's so silly. Like, they should be testing themselves against teams like the Lightning and the Panthers in the first round. Why are we throwing these crazy why is Tampa, Florida the first round? To me, that's just so silly. You have these 2 insane teams. Like, let them go on a run, and they have to fight each other in the first round. Like, to me, that's a Stanley Cup matchup almost. Yeah,
I'm trying to do math real quick and see like what the matchups would have been last year
if you did 1 to 8.
Yeah, if you do 1 to 8, so the wild card would have stayed the same. No, the wild card would not have stayed the same. It would have been Washington, Montreal staying the same. It would be the Maple Leafs versus the Devils. So the Senators wouldn't have been a wild card team. They would have been a higher seed. So you would have had Leafs versus Devils. You would have had Lightning versus Florida. Okay, so that wouldn't have changed. But that's wild that would have been a 3 versus 6.
Good to know that we wouldn't have avoided them either way.
Yeah, and then it would be Carolina and Ottawa.
See, that's interesting. Like, why don't we watch that?
That I agree. That's more interesting. Is that right? No. I'm sorry. That's my mistake. It would have been Tampa and Ottawa, and then it would have been Florida and Carolina, which that would have been a banger first round.
Still, yeah. I mean, look, the Sens versus the Lightning is a sick matchup. I'm not going to throw numbers out there because I'm going to mess them up, but I know this as a fact. Historically, like they are very high scoring games when they play each other. Like in the last 5 years, it's like more than 7 goals almost every time because they just dump like 5 or 4 in each other's nets. It's crazy.
Yeah. And you get fresh matchups. And I think you also reward teams for moving up a little bit. And like you said, like the New Jersey Devils were the 3 seed in the Metro, and they would have been the second to last team to even make the playoffs.
Right.
So, and I know we've had a couple of occasions over the years. I can't remember the situation off the top of my head right now, where a team that comes in as a division winner, or as one of the top 3 teams of the division, wouldn't have made the playoffs because there was a first team out of the wild card that had more points for them. Right. I just think it kind of robs a lot of different things here. So
I'll throw one more final thing at you. Yeah. What if we just disposed of divisions entirely and it was just 2 conferences and it's just the top 8 from each conference?
Nah, I don't like that. I think there has to be some division.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, because I think if you're doing the schedule based on, I think if you're like basing the schedule based on division matchups and trying to prioritize like teams you play more, yeah, I think you need to play certain teams a certain amount of times a year, more than others in your conference even.
Sure.
I disagree, but I can see your logic there.
Just change.
We need some change. Whatever it is, we need some change in the NHL when it comes to playoffs and division and everything like that. Let us know what you think in the comments. We know some of you are very fired up about this as well. We're excited to hear from you, and we're excited to hear what changes that you would make. Hey, big day tomorrow, prospects tournament here in Tampa. It starts. We're going to be talking about some of the top prospects in the Lightning system, the players that we're most excited to see. Can't wait for that one. We have some actual hockey to talk about tomorrow. That's going to do it for us on today's Locked on Lightning. Thanks for making us your first listen of the day. Back tomorrow with an all-new episode. We'll see you then.